You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Al, we're going to speak to a gentleman, a man, a person. I'm assuming he's a man and he's a gentleman, but he's a person, called Damien Richardson. And he is a well-known television, film and theatre actor. He grew up in Adelaide. He's studied politics and drama at the Flinders University before moving to Melbourne, Australia in 1989. He has been in many shows, television shows and feature films, including Neighbours, City Homicide, The Hard Word, The Jammed Rouge, and Jack Irish. He was nominated for the AFI Award for his role in Secret Life of Us. He's worked with some of the biggest names in Australian film and television, including Guy Pearce, Joel Edgerton, Sam Worthington, Rachel Griffiths, Gary Sweet, Vince Colosimo, Noni Hazelhurst, Shane Bourne, Nardine Garner, Aaron Pedersen, and Deborah Mailman. He also did a telly-movie, Fatal Honeymoon, shot in the Gold Coast with Harvey Keitel. Now, among other things, there is a whole raft of information, but I just wanted to read this out. After a successful year of speaking engagements in South Australia and Victoria, Damien is taking his tour of Are We Awake Yet? To Queensland and New South Wales in 2024. He takes a satirical look at his life and career and the cost of speaking out. That is one of the first questions I'm going to ask, Damien. Welcome to You Cannot Be Serious. There is a whole lot more to your portfolio, of course, but Richard Wollstonecroft here is across most of it. What I want to know is, in your role, or in the fact of having an opinion in this day and age where I often cite this, we are living in times when the intelligent are being silenced so that stupid people won't feel offended. In your role of speaking out about things that you just believe, you tend to either get cancelled or shelved or put aside, or people view you sceptically like they do with me and most other people have opinions who I've got a feeling the mainstream embrace, but the people who are around us all up are the vocal minority, and we pay the price for that. What have you suffered as a result of speaking out, Damien?
Presumptuous to say that I was one of the intelligent, but that may be the case, Sam. And I think you're like a classic example, almost one of the first examples of what would happen to an individual that strays off of the script, which is extraordinary to me, because I even used to watch the footy show. I actually got to a point where when I went to university, where I had to make a decision to myself, and you guys were talking about cancel culture before and why someone would be cancelled, but it's not as bold as someone tells you what to think. You know when to cancel yourself or not to cancel yourself if you want to continue to operate in a certain sphere. And I know by the time I got to university, which was back in 1987, I knew already probably not to lead with saying that I watched the footy show. And if I did say I watched the footy show, I'd certainly make sure I had to marginalise one figure that was on the show, and that figure was probably Sam Newman. Now, no one actually told me that, but I knew that instinctively, because we're pack animals. Humans are pack animals. We can read a room before we've necessarily even walked into the room, and we know the polite things and the correct things to say if we would like to get ahead. And you talk about the mainstream, and you can clearly reading out my CV there. I operated in a mainstream level inside of film and television in this country or any country throughout the Western world. And do you think you're allowed to have an opinion other than the opinion du jour of the day? And I think we saw that just recently with the referendum around the Indigenous voice to Parliament. All the institutions, every single one of them was pro the voice, yet the majority of Australians, sweeping majority, were against it.
And just in a larger scale, to to concede that you are, whether you are or not, I don't know, but to concede that you are a Trump supporter, that honestly, if no one ever concedes that for fear of retribution and the kickback of people saying, are you completely fucking stupid?
Yeah.
And then you have to say, well, why do you say that? And then it is amazing. It is extraordinary.
It's that you couldn't even say that.
Yeah,
you couldn't even offer
say it,
support for a
that's the
figure that
point.
no one's probably ever going to meet in Australia or even really know who that person is. All we know about anybody is what we hear through the media. And often even shows like this become shows about, I'm going to report back to you what I heard from my media source, because what's happening in the Gaza Strip at this particular point in time, I actually wouldn't have a clue unless I rely on the sources of information that are telling me anyway.
So what are a couple of things that you've had an opinion of that have caused you some angst?
Well, I'll tell you what I have actually seen that I know to be a fact. And I saw a protest movement in Melbourne, and I saw a protest movement go to Canberra, which was around the vaccine mandates, etc. When people had enough of being locked into their homes and they couldn't make any sense of it, spill out into the street in literally hundreds of thousands of people that I saw with my own eyes that were reported in the alternative media. And if I turned on the ABC or Channel 7 or 9 or 10, it didn't happen. It actually literally didn't exist, to the point where I could have a fight with someone in my state about whether that actually occurred in their state or not, because they were sitting at home and didn't see it on their TV. It didn't happen in Spring Street that day. So how am I going to then talk about the greater world, what's happening literally in the Gaza Strip or wherever else, in the Ukraine or wherever else that these conflicts are occurring, with any accuracy, believing what I'm told in the mainstream? And that was the problem for me. I realised that the mainstream is an absolute lie. It's a sellout to whatever. Is it Big Pharma or what other massive conglomerate are they selling to? They're selling to the highest bidder, obviously, which is not someone with my opinions, that's for sure.
Just before you ask, Richard, so in all those credits that I read out of them, all the shows that you've been in and all the producers and all the companies that you work for, was it still bubbling along then, or hadn't quite gained enough momentum for it to put in jeopardy your employment or people, your opportunities or your chances of advancement, or was it starting to be a deleterious thing to your career?
It was a deleterious thing to my career. I'd written a couple of articles that were published in a magazine called Quadrant, which is like almost like a...
Saw that,
right-wing journal.
Well, they'd say it's right-wing, whatever that even necessarily means, or conservative, exactly. And it's not something I would have necessarily said. I remember when I was on Neighbours, actually, they came out and they did it like one of those fold-out pieces on you that they do, the weekend magazine comes and they do a photo, and the photographer came in. Now, the photographer came in, he started bagging out. The first thing he did to enter the room was basically start bagging out flyover country when he was in the US and the sort of people that might support Trump. And it was very difficult for me to sit in my lounge room and have that guy in there and not say, hey, by the way, they're probably my people, because I'm probably born from a working class Adelaide family who probably would have all been Trump supporters. But then for me to operate in the arts establishment, I have to belie that history, my heritage, my pedigree, to get along. And I just got to a point where I thought I'm not going to. And I'm certainly not going to in my own lounge room. So, but I don't want to have a fight with this photographer necessarily. So then the publicist there is really interested in me, like, oh my God, you've got all this other stuff going. Perhaps we could use this, not knowing at that particular time. And I know already that she won't be able to use anything I'm saying anyway, but she doesn't know that yet. She's like, well, where those ideas come from? And I said, well, actually, because we did this spread and they ended up talking about this article that I had written for Quadrant, and they wanted to know what it was about. And I said, cultural Marxism. And they went, what's that? And then I sort of went on to describe a little bit of what that was, which is clearly what we're talking about now, the cancellation of opinions that aren't approved on in the mainstream. And I never heard from her again. And the idea was she was going to promote that article as a way of promoting the show that I was actually on, as a cross-promotion thing. And obviously it didn't go anywhere. And I knew it wouldn't go anywhere. And I was a fool to even mention it in the first place, because it did make it deleterious to my prospects, as you so rightly point out, Sam, as you so well know yourself.
Do you think the wheel is turning, that other opinion alternate opinion is now actually getting a more of a run because people have found the gig.
We've had enough, yeah.
The gig is up. As someone said, and I love, these are not any of my things, I'm not smart enough to think this up, but never worry about the haters. They're only angry because the truth you speak contradicts the lies they live.
That sounds great, yeah. And there's an alternative media source, and like this is a classic example of what we're doing here. Your podcast is an alternative media source. Is that why the government are moving to, bring in that misinformation bill too, because of the difficulty that's created for it? But even in the pandemic, Fernando would turn on his camera and there'd be, 60, 70,000 people watching it within the first 5 minutes, sort of figures that I think Channel 7 and Channel 9 would have begged for. So it's a real problem to them where people are going to alternative media sources to find out what's going on.
Anyone? Doc, got anything?
Yes, I have, actually.
Richard?
Sure.
Well, Richard, you go first.
Well, Damien, tell us a little bit about working on Neighbours and your experience there. What was the character you played, and how did it feel, having contrary views, operating within essentially what was Australia's most popular, TV drama?
I think Neighbours was probably Australia's most popular TV drama once upon a time, and what a clever concept that there would be a group of households next to each other, and you'd get into that world by it's very, very, very simple, but it's also very clever. But now what does it do 35 years later plus that has been around? What does it become? It becomes basically a stalking horse for whatever is the progressive ideal of that particular point in time. So if it's gay marriage, that's what you're going to get.
You noticed the kind of woke ideology coming into the show?
Absolutely. But I was from an old school family, an old Anglo-Celtic, Irish Catholic sort of family that were, knockabout, probably weren't into that sort of stuff. If that's what your thing is, don't worry, go for it. But, we're over here doing our own thing. And that family was very successful as far as, again, unlike we were talking about the footy show, people loved Sam. Yeah. They loved him because they wanted the controversy. They wanted to hear themselves reflected back in honesty, not mediated through the media. So you get this half version of Sam. And I think it was the same thing with that Aussie family. They thought, that's who we are. They just talk as we might talk. Yep. They were a bit stupider perhaps than what we actually are, because that's that show anyway. But so that family got cancelled. First they got rid of me, but they actually got rid of the entire family. Really? But it becomes a problem too, because they're now, what that show now is looking at, wants to see Indian families that are now Australian, and wants to see, Iraqi families that no, they're not, they're Australian. Everyone's Australian now, and it's now every second character will be trans, or they'll be in a homosexual relationship, or they'll be bisexual. They might go either way.
So it's more than just the ABC pushing this cultural Marxist rubbish.
Heaps more. And that's the only reason it still existed, because the show got canned. And it got picked up again.
No, I actually remember your face very well from Australia. I used to watch all the Australian dramas, still do. When you were offered a part in one of these Australian dramas, were you more attracted to the good guy part or the bad guy part? And I'll give you a quick example. Lisa McCune has, for generations, always played the good guy part or the good girl part, because she's a sweet person. I've interviewed her a couple of times. But I once saw her play a bad person part in Rake.
Yes.
And I'll tell you what, I have never seen a more evil character in my life. Lisa McCune, the embodiment of goodness, playing one of the most evil characters. So which of the parts...
Might tell you something, that one.
Yeah. Which of the parts that you would be attracted to, the good part or the bad part? Or just whichever you're offered?
This is the answer I say, because Lisa McCune, if you're a jobbing actor, right, and you talk about Lisa McCune, so she was on Blue Heelers as the good angelic copper forever. She would have paid a mortgage off with that. Maybe she's buying a holiday home. When she does Rake, and everyone goes, that was a great role, she's probably on for one episode because she's a psycho from hell, and she will not sustain. They
psycho lawyer from hell.
Well, that's it. They don't. More often than not, they don't build a TV series around someone as dangerous as that. But they'll build a series around a more moderate personality. So that's what happens. You would want to play a good guy, because the good guy will have a sustained career on that.
So are you more attracted to the good guy or the bad?
Oh, we're not necessarily, because obviously there's a lot of fun in playing that someone isn't a good guy, and we're an amalgam of all those things as human beings anyway, aren't we, ultimately? But I went from playing a lot of bad characters, and when I got a nomination for an AFI award is when I beat up Kelly Deborah Mailman's character on Secret Life of Us. You know, he was a psycho, but somewhere I got an AFI nomination for it. But I was on City Homicide for 4 years as a good mainstream conservative sort of valued copper, and
that got you the jobs. Being a good guy.
Well, that gets you a sustained. Whereas, like the Secret Life of Us would have been 2 episodes, like literally 2 weeks of shooting, maybe tops. I got paid for 2 weeks of work. You know what I mean? Whereas City Homicide was on it for 4 years. So I think that's a big part of what the difference is too.
So the good guy pays a lot better than
the good
bad
guy. Yeah. In that scenario, maybe there's other streaming services now where that may not be the case. Mm-hmm. But I don't have a TV. Yeah. I don't watch TV.
All right.
Yeah. And that's the thing you talked about with Neighbours too, you were asking before, and that became a thing when I was on Neighbours too, because it was great. Like, I don't want to just can it, because it was great to have a job, and it was great to have that structure in your life too, because you often don't have structure as in the arts and entertainment industry. So to go to a job every day, and then the idea of pulling a scene apart and making it work and having it crackle between the 3 or 4 actors or whoever was involved in that scene was a fantastic thing. But there was 2 times when you'd look at the script and you'd panic about how ridiculous or how much of a buffoon are they going to make Gary Canning this week, and is it going to be possible for me to even maintain my sense of dignity as a human being and still be able to deliver these words?
Are there any of these movies, whether Australian made or international ones, that you look at and you say that's almost the perfect movie I could look at time and again and dissect all those scenes and see how it's put together? I mean, I for example, if you want me to offer you one, there's 2, The Godfather and Remains of the Day. I think they're almost the 2 perfect movies.
Yep,
I look at time and again. Are there any that you choose?
Yeah, it's difficult because, see, I've stopped engaging with the mainstream.
Right.
I've literally stopped engaging with the mainstream. I don't have a TV. I can't remember last time I saw a film. I talk to Richard often because I'm waiting. Now, when I see a film, I'm waiting for the moral lesson that I'm going to be given, the overt moral lesson.
Yeah. You see it,
and I go,
many
the message.
films made these
the
days.
message, the message, the
I mean,
the
film
woke
should never
message.
be a lecture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I never like a film. I don't mind if a film has meaning. You know what I mean? Like, a film should have meaning, but it shouldn't be lecturing you. And if you look at all the great filmmakers, they were never lecturing you. Someone like Stanley Kubrick would give you an interesting, and he would like raise a debate with the film. Say with 2001 about the power of AI, right? You know, so, and like, you know, could it potentially become lethal? You know, and he wasn't saying it was necessarily a good or bad thing. He just says this is a problem we're going to face, and it is now a problem we're facing as we see AI beginning to influence our lives, as it begins to take over things like the algorithms and the things we see on social media. I mean, already our lives are beginning to be structured by AI. So, you know, I think that is the way to, you know, that's what good art does. And then this kind of woke art, which seems to be almost like made by a committee, you know, like Stalinist way. Like, these are woke ideas. You know, we believe in transgender politics. We believe in, you know, LGBT. We believe in this. You know, we believe in the yes vote. And you're all got to believe that in like some kind of communistic way.
So was someone like Steven Spielberg, who made Saving Private Ryan, was he lecturing us, or was he just asking the question as to why good people go and fight wars? Trying to explain it to us.
Well, I mean, you know, I mean, he's sort of an interesting filmmaker. I mean, he's made some interesting films, but, you know, I would say he's part of what you call the globalist agenda, particularly recently, where his work, you know, is pushing a certain kind of political globalism. Earlier in his career, his work was a lot less kind of political and I think a bit more interesting.
But Hollywood comes with its agenda anyway, doesn't it? Straight away, as soon as you see a Hollywood film, you're engaging in that, and anyone to work in that space would know that's the politics they're engaging with. And of course they are, and any place that makes films like Hollywood is going to come with a political understanding that you're going to have to accept to operate in that space. But at what point do you get to a point where you find it increasingly difficult to accept those things? And I had trouble well before the COVID narrative, but that's when it spilled over for me, when I went, oh, this is enough. And every mainstream television show, and therefore every mainstream actor, was pro-vaccine, or at least to be seen to be pro-vaccine, to make sure that they could then allow themselves to continue to have a working life. And I just got to a point where I thought, I can't tolerate this anymore. So where am I now? I'm in real trouble. I'm in serious trouble because I'm potentially sacrificing my ability to pay my mortgage, to pay for my 3 children, for the opinions that I have. So at what point now, what's being questioned of me as a human being, and for me in this particular case as a male, as a man, to stand up for something? Am I being asked to stand up for something? Did all the battles we fought happen historically? Was it just my grandfather's war record that I'm so proud of in the Middle East? Is that where it ended? Well, it didn't. Fukuyama said that the history's ended with the fall of the Berlin Wall, that we're going to be into this sort of harmonious, post communist world, but it's actually not the case at all. There's still battles being fought. And is there a battle being asked of me in this particular point in time, in living in Glenroy, in Victoria, in Australia? And I felt there was. And I thought, I'm going to stand up for that, come what may, and see what happens. And that's taken me now on a different trajectory, and not necessarily a trajectory that they're going to necessarily want to use me in a TV show. And even if they do, what I have to accept is the premise, because I have been in for auditions since the COVID pandemic, since I took a stand against it. But I have to accept the premise of the scripts. And the premise is basically that Australia is an illegitimate culture in many respects because of the historical wrongs that was done to the Indigenous people that were here beforehand. We can be redeemed if we accept multiculturalism, if we accept, mass immigration from the 4 corners of the globe, and we accept what was wrong in the foundation of this country to be a white Australia in the first place. If I accept that, then I can be allowed into the pantheon still to participate. If I don't accept that, I'm in trouble. And I guess that's why I'm here on this podcast.
So essentially you've been banned or
Really?
barred.
In a way, because there is a reality to what I'm saying. There's a truth to what I'm saying, and it's a very, very uncomfortable truth. And I think it's a truth that a lot of Anglo-Australians would identify with and know. So when I would go around to speaking engagements, I ran for office at the federal election in 2022, and I would talk like this.
Which electorate?
I ran for the Senate.
Right.
I never had a chance of winning, but I had a chance of garnering some support, and I had a chance of offering support to people that have been marginalised by the political process itself.
You were in Flinders University in the mid-'80s.
Yes.
I was at Flinders University in 71 onwards, and then went to there. So in my day, it was the Vietnam War.
Yep. And
the best letter I ever got was from Gough Whitlam that said, I'm no longer invited to partake of the Vietnam War. Great letter, wonderful letter. Mm-hmm. And I really admire all those people who went, sent by their country, conscripted, and I've treated many, many of them, and they're wonderful, damaged individuals, and I wasn't damaged. What were the political things because the anti-Vietnam thing came out of Flinders University in South Australia in the early 70s. What were the political movements at Flinders in your time in the 80s?
Well, when I went there, I went to the drama centre, and I did politics as well, so I did a drama politics double major. Ronald Reagan was the president at the time. Maybe there was some sort of inspiration. Obviously, he'd been an actor, and he'd become the president of the United States of America.
He was solid, Reagan.
Yeah, well, it was very feminist. So the course I did was feminist, and I got there and we were basically told that we wouldn't be doing Shakespeare because Shakespeare he wasn't just a man, he was a misogynist. And Bertolt Brecht was held up as in the pantheon as the greatest there's the pinnacle of the dramatic art form in the end, do you know what I mean? Communist, yeah, that's right.
Jewish.
And I was just a young kid straight out of school, and I went, oh, thank God I'm getting here to learn this stuff. I didn't even know that, Shakespeare was whatever. And what's a misogynist anyway? And I found this sort of language out, and then I'd take it home and pick on my family with it and go, well, I tell my grandfather that he was clearly a misogynist by the way he treated my grandmother and stuff. And he thought, great, well, so finally we've got this working class kid, first one to go to university, and he's using words that I've never even heard of, so it must be working, it must be good, But it took some time for me then too to catch up on what the propagandisation of me as a young mind, a young intelligent mind, and I just picked it up. But something did rankle with me even then. Something rankled with me. But that's very much.
Were there actors then that you admired that you don't admire now?
I don't know. It's hard to admire actors. You can admire an actor for their craft, right? Because they might have a fantastic craft. But acting is not a profession when you can afford to be seen to standing outside of the narrative, because it is the propaganda arm of the regime, of the international machine. It is that's where the money goes to propagandise what we're doing. You can't be saying something off script, my friend. Look at what they did to Russell Brand. Russell Brand's a classic example of someone created by the industry as a very sort of left-wing guy who's obviously moved in his political position, and suddenly they really had to cancel Russell because he was getting a lot of traction.
Only a couple of them, from my point of view, stand out. John Voight probably has withstood...
Totally.
And was great in Ray
He's
Donovan. And Clint Eastwood.
Absolutely.
Clint Eastwood.
Another one. Trump supporter.
Rosie McDonald. Rosie...
yes.
Hang on, no, what's her name?
Rosie's not a Trump supporter.
No, not Rosie McDonald.
what's her name? Yeah.
Oh, the woman,
Yeah.
Roseanne
Barr.
Yeah,
Roseanne Barr. Sorry, that's who I was trying to... Yep.
But Clint Eastwood, he's prevailed probably much to the chagrin of the Hollywood set, but he's just still going at just over
Still
90.
making a new film right now.
He's still making... Yeah, he's doing
Yeah,
his
90s.
Yeah.
So if you're big enough, you can withstand the heat,
This
as
is
they
true.
say.
That's
But,
the alternative, isn't it? If you're big enough,
Yep.
you can afford to maybe have a position outside of that. Yeah.
So in 72 or 73, when Marlon Brando refused the Academy Award for The Godfather because of his perception of how they treated the American Indians, how did you view that?
Well, I was 2.
Goo goo gaga.
But I mean, in retrospect, when you saw what he had done, he had rejected the
I
Academy.
thought it was bullshit.
You think he should have taken it?
I mean, look, the Brando is Brando, and he's entitled to his own political opinions, but I thought it was bullshit. I mean, it just seems like he'd fallen in with that, that kind of politics in America, even though, I mean, obviously there are some interesting issues that come out of, American Indian politics, and obviously there has been injustice, but I think it wasn't the right thing to do because, I mean, he'd been in the political wilderness. He'd made a lot of films in the late 60s that hadn't done so well. And then, he was given this spectacular part in The Godfather. I think he should have turned up and accepted the award. And, he could have made a comment at the end himself about something, but, I think it was disrespectful.
And I think, too, to be considered a good person, you have to accept the civil rights movement as being a wonderful thing and a very important moment in history. But again, it's one of those things that we just learn that that's the right thing to do. And you learn about, Martin Luther King and judge a man not by the colour of his skin, but the content of his character.
Afterwards.
You learn about it afterwards, and now it becomes like one of those things that you have to take on board.
How was I deaf to it at the time?
Well, no, I think now there needs to be critical eye needs to be cast over why we are taught that those things are so wonderful, and that you have no other option but to accept that as being a wonderful thing. Is that not the beginning of the attack on
Western civilization?
See, I think one of the best or the most entertaining movies I've seen in recent years, you may not have seen it, is called The Green Card. And it's about, it's a two-parter.
That should be mandatory for... That should be... Green card should be mandatory for all schools to
Green
watch.
Book.
Green Book.
Green Book, yeah.
About the roughneck guy who is the chauffeur for the concert pianist.
Yeah.
And the one about space, what's that called? What? Numbers. Yeah, what's that called? Fuck.
The one
About the three black women who did the calculations to put John Glenn into space, called Hidden Figures.
Yeah.
They should be 2 mandatory films to watch about racism, and they are fantastic.
I couldn't agree more.
The Green Book and Hidden Figures are 2 of the best films you'd ever see.
And I can't believe when you saw Green Book, it was basically a two-hander.
Yeah.
And the guy in the back seat, the black American, he won Best Supporting Actor. 2019.
And true story.
And it's a true story. And
so
the guy in the
Hidden Figures.
front was up for the best actor. He lost out to the guy from Freddie Mercury, and it was the best picture of the year. And I can't believe I missed it. And I only found it last year.
Okay.
And my wife and I watched it.
Watched
and then
it
the
twice.
next night,
Yep.
we watched it again.
Yes, I
What I
don't-
think is
Is
interesting
that
is
right?
a lot of
Okay.
these films raise the issue of identity politics. And as you've noticed, Sam, like when you bring up, obviously if one raises identity politics in relation to Aboriginal politics, that's celebrated by the ABC. That's like, of course, yes, whatever, land rights, this, that and the other. But you can't raise identity politics apropos of European people. That possibly settling this country was a good thing. You know what I mean? You can't raise that issue because that's somehow considered like white nationalism or, But it's like, why can't you? If you are going to play the identity politics game, why are Europeans not allowed to play it as well?
So what happens when the money comes along to you and says, you're a free thinker, you've got a lot of experience, you know what you're doing. What are the movies you would like to make in Australia nowadays?
I think it would be hard to make a movie because you would need so much money, you need so much finance, so you need the capital to back it in the first place, and the capital won't necessarily be there, perhaps to back a movie of the sort of conversation that we're having right now, where I'm obviously coming from. I imagine there wouldn't be any money there for it. So instead, I've written a play. I've just finished writing a draft of a play, and I've done this before, and it's a two-hander. I've deliberately made it a two-hander.
Movement in place?
Yes. I'm flipping around with saying maybe calling it Waiting for Mum. But I've got it called Movement at Place at the moment. Yeah, you're right,
That's
Sam.
about,
That's very
about
good.
love?
Well, it's about the impossibility of love
Yes.
in the modern world in some respects too, as a result of, feminism is the du jour. That's the thing that you can't criticise. You cannot be seen to be staying inside of polite society and polite company if you'd make any criticism of the feminist movement. That's when I first got cancelled, when I was doing a show with Channel 7, and they told me not to come to work tomorrow because because I'd written an article in rebuttal of Clementine Ford. I think she'd written an article which is published in The Age, because it will be published in The Age. I love this thing about, the left or whatever makes out it's fighting against the man, even when it becomes the man. It is the man. It is the mainstream. It is the narrative. And I wrote an article in defence of Western culture as a response to what Clementine Ford had written. And of course I sent it to The Age, said, well, this is who I am, this is my CV, you may be interested in publishing me just as a result of that. It had a beginning, a middle and an end. It made sense, it was coherent, it wasn't just an attack on her. Crickets, sound of crickets, didn't hear a word. What a surprise. And in the end I've just posted it myself on Facebook, and then I got told through my agent, don't come into work tomorrow. That's the ramifications. Right? Don't come in.
Fantastic.
We've rethought how we would cast. Oh, okay. It was a small role. It didn't matter in some respects, but it was a shot across the bow. And then that's when you go into your own head and you go into the censorship, because you're meant to censor yourself. Yep. You're not meant to say these things, Damien. You're meant to know there's a microphone in front of you. There's potentially a crowd of people listening. You don't say this stuff, mate. And that's what I went home then, and I still had a wife and kids at that particular point in time, and maybe that's why I don't have a marriage anymore too, because I've taken this stance. That could well be the case, because often you have a woman in the background going, shut up, mate, suck it up. I know what you're saying. I even agree with what you're saying, but suck it up because you're paying for this at the moment, all right?
I've been told that myself.
A lot of that sort of stuff. So, but the recriminations did come where I'm going, why am I saying this? Why am I doing this? What's going on? So I ring up the union movement for, I want to go unfair dismissal. There's a possibility of an unfair dismissal here. They haven't even told me why. They just said, don't come to work tomorrow, basically. And she asked me what the nature of the complaint was. So I explained to the good secretary from the union movement, and the phone went down. It's like, and then couldn't even ring anyone, And then the next time I get a decent job is probably when I did the 4 years on Neighbours, and the union people are there saying, why aren't you a member anymore? Join the union. Come on, join the union. I said, are you kidding me? So again, it comes to a moment of principle. What's my principle? Is it better for me to be seen to be a member of the union movement because then I fit in here and I can espouse all the stuff? Or is there something else being asked of me to stand up for myself and who I am? And that's what I chose in the end. And it costs me. It does cost. It comes at a cost. It reveals something else as a result. I couldn't have written Movement in Place if I hadn't have made these stances, because I wouldn't have anything to say. I'd just be sprouting back what we've all heard every time on the mainstream? Anyway, Sam, I can see you're keen to come in. Please come in.
Not at all. No.
I'll just keep talking otherwise.
Not at all. No, in a much lesser and more trivial Matt, I was cancelled off open mic. Remember Mike Sheehan used to do that? We had a discussion here, Don Scott and I and Mike Sheehan, about why Nicky Winmar lifted his jumper up at Victoria Park 30 years ago.
Yes, I do.
And it was
There's a statue of him
very sensible conversation, as a lot of people thought it was about his overweightness. He was pointing to his fat guts, saying, we prevailed in spite of me being unfit. And he said, and we accepted it, that it was about his skin colour. And we were discussing that, and we got charged with vilification and got fined $100,000 for daring to discuss what everyone thought it was about. And I was scheduled to go on open mic, and I rang Mike up and I said, now, what time am I meant to be in there? He said, I forgot to tell you. He said, they don't want you to come in. I said, were you actually going to tell me that? He said, I was a bit embarrassed to tell you. I said, embarrassed to tell me? We would have been far more embarrassed if I'd turned up. And yes, he said, yeah, because, he said, because it was considered racism. We've been charged with vilification. I said, well, you were part of the conversation, and you and Don. I wasn't even at the game. I was just asking you some questions about it. So
why can't we talk?
I said, why couldn't we possibly talk about it? So
there's all these little quislings around it.
And
stand up, and then they can throw you under the bus because it's very easy, it's very convenient, and you become that person. And see, I potentially become that person to people too. We maybe have this conversation, but in the end, we can marginalise Damien because remember him that you had to get rid of before? Stood up against the vaccines. He's the problem.
Well,
great.
He's replaceable.
That's right, and we all are replaceable ultimately, and that's the
problem. The movement in place was about love, and you did a movie with the great Harvey Keitel up in the Gold Coast, I think, Fatal Honeymoon.
Yep. Nadia Tass was the director of that. Yes.
Who was?
Nadia Tass.
And what was Harvey Keitel's got a pretty big CV. What was he out doing that for?
Yeah, let's face it, he probably wasn't at the pinnacle of his career at that particular juncture, but I was great to be on a set with him. And that's the thing that makes people excited. They love...
How'd you get on with Harvey?
Yeah, pretty good. He was good.
Because Sam Neill talks about him not well in his book.
Okay, right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, look, Harvey came and he was just like really deliberately almost had that method acting style that Americans are renowned for. Like, what is this scene? What's happening here? Why am I saying this word? No, I don't need it. I'm not going to say it. And, he's at that point in his career too where he can say that, whereas, underlings like me are saying, just thanks very much for the job, what do you want me to say? I'll do anything you want sort of thing, and he's going, no, that's not necessary, whatever, and it's good. So he really unpacked that script, and
Isn't it amazing how you remember things I see that he was in? I just was looking him up just while you were talking, and he was in the Grand Budapest Hotel, which I remember Ralph Fiennes being in, and I don't know why I remember this. Ralph Fiennes had one of the great lines, which I remembered, and it said, "Nice to see there are still some slivers of civilization left in this barbaric slaughterhouse that was once known as humanity."
It's incredible that you remember that line, because that's extraordinary. It wasn't a line to remember. I have
no idea why I remember that, but
so
I thought,
detailed.
Who would think that up? That's very clever to say. Slivers
Ralph
of
Fiennes is
civilization.
He's been on Schindler's List.
Upended the Sheila in the toilets on the Qantas plane.
He did, didn't he? Yeah, he was a very busy man.
He went on to bigger and better things. She got sacked. So the show you took on the road, and I think you're taking on the road this year. Are we awake yet?
Yes.
I know you've probably covered most of it in what you've said, but I have
said some of it,
No, but is that...
What else do you talk about in that show?
Just recollections of just the... not unfair, the biased world we live in, and how people can't accept another opinion. And it's like that saying I just read out, because it makes people uncomfortable, because the lies, the truth you speak makes them uncomfortable because it distorts the lies that they live.
And it's definitely how the mainstream manipulates the Overton window. So what we're talking about, you guys might know this concept of the Overton window. It's what you're allowed to talk about and still be considered to be part of polite society. So, you know, you have to take on the civil rights movement as just being fact, just being a wonderful thing that just sprung out of the necessity, the human need, and that's a wonderful thing. If you make any criticism of it or have any concerns or any questions, you're marginalised already straight away. The clear example of that was obviously around the vaccine mandates, and that's what made me find myself in this space. I was pushed into it more than thinking that I would actually enter it. And there was a protest movement out the front of the CFMEU office. There was a whole group of construction workers saying, we don't want to take your vaccine, mate, and to keep our jobs. And Sally McManus, the head of the ACTU, came out of the airwaves and called us all Nazis. And I thought, that's extraordinary. I don't want to take a vaccine, and suddenly now I'm in Germany 1937. What's happening here, you know? And then it became an education, a process of education for me, what the media does. And that's the ultimate vilification, because here we are living in a world where it says, well, let's celebrate diversity and equality and inclusion and difference of everybody, but we still need someone to marginalise. Who can we marginalise? Well, who we can marginalise is who we beat in the Second World War still. They're the Nazis. So anyone that stands outside of the system that becomes a problem to us, as that movement was a problem when they were out the front of the CFMEU office because they were just too strong, it was like civil unrest on the streets of Melbourne like it was 1937 Germany. It was extraordinary.
Hence the fact they call Trump a Nazi.
Yeah, exactly. They call Trump
because they can't think of anything else to call people.
And the more you look at it, Sam, the more you see they call any of those people, like when you was talking about recently the Welcome to Country, how you didn't want to have it at footy matches anymore, and basically they vilified you as being outside of the Overton window. They create that Overton window for themselves. There's still probably the massive population probably agrees with you, but they make a pretense world where they don't agree with you. So you become beyond the pale, and that's what they did to us for standing up. And so that's what I often go around now and talk about. And it's the gift that keeps on giving, because if you just keep staying in that space, the more they heap upon you to be that Nazi, to the point where they actually wrote an article. This is so perverse. It was in September this year. So it's not, 2023, I should say. So just last year now. Likening me to Hitler for standing up for native timber forestry workers. Now the native timber industry is finished on the 1st of this year in Victoria. So we went down to Traralgon and stood up for these people. I went down there just to report on it, ended up making a speech there because they asked me to, and I vilified in the Age as literally being Hitler.
Fantastic.
I mean, it's perverse.
You couldn't ask for something better, mate.
It's just standing up for the native...
local. Yeah, because it's and because I articulated the fact that this is basically an industry populated by white working class men in support of their white working class families. I dared make that collective understanding of white identity. If you do that, you're in trouble.
But
You can make a collective identity about any other group, and not only will you not be in trouble, it'll be celebrated. The right of Israel to protect its national borders. How wonderful it is that we have Croatian people here, and they should continue to celebrate their Croatian identity or their African identity or you name it. If you dare stand up for a white identity, you're in trouble. You're in serious trouble. And that's what I talk about in this Are We Awake Yet that's been cruising around the country. And there's a voice, and there's people that are interested in hearing it. And I don't have to make it up, because it just keeps being revealed to me.
But you being called a Nazi is not a reflection on you, it's a reflection on the people who say that because they're either inbred or they're ill-bred or they're ignorant. And because they have nothing... They cannot think of any other word to call you other than pig's vomit or any other completely bad name, because they're just lazy and
but if you see
nothing else to say.
The speech I made at Traralgon, it's online, and what happens is a lot of people are laughing because it's funny. Because I maintain a sense of humour amongst all of this. And it's garnering support because it does have that self-effacing humour as well. That was the threat to the system, to the status quo. So what they're doing by calling me a Nazi in a mainstream publication is letting everybody else that's in their lounge rooms who aren't thinking about it, who don't really care, just remember somewhere along, that's that guy oh, he's a Nazi, because they read it in the paper. That's what they're trying to do, to make sure that you cannot get support. They're also trying to crush the support that I did have around me, because everyone's going, yeah, go Damo, good on you. Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. Oh, they called him Hitler. Oh, sorry, that's too much, because that's too much for everybody. You hear that word, Hitler, oh my God,
It was a Trotskyist strategy, to call people racist or Nazis or something, like anybody who opposed essentially the communist agenda. And...
No. So I see you are embracing Australia Day. You have organising an Australia Day celebration at the Doncaster Lawn Bowls Club. You might have to have some security for the Invasion Day activists that come down and light sticks and throw them at you.
What do we all think of that bullshit?
But honestly, the fact that Australia Day, if someone, as I say, hadn't sailed up a river or landed here in a boat, or I don't know what, why we all can't embrace what this country, this great country is, without this continual division. And how you invaded, fair enough. I don't know if invaded or not, but there'd be nothing here if someone hadn't invaded us.
Who do you think would have come here if the English didn't do it? How many if the Germans came here? Or the Belgians? That would have been a lot worse.
The French were here already. That's why it's called La Perouse, because the French were here. There's place names around the country.
Anyhow, so that's...
Can I just tell you how great Australia is?
Doc, go ahead, Doc, seeing as you've made a fortune out of it.
I was handing out how to vote cards a couple of cycles ago, I was a member of the Liberal Party, and I'm there by myself, pre-poll, in the second safest seat in Australia, in Barker and Mount Gambier. And up the road comes, say, 8:30 in the morning, it's just open, no one is there. I'm the only person there wearing a little blue vest. And up the road saunters this old fellow. He's a patient of mine. I've put two new knees at him, and he's walking very well. And he comes up the road and he gets right into my face. And I'm not going to say the word, but it's about going and seeing people in the Northern Territory. And he gets right in, he says, I would never vote for you, Liberal, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, Reg, I'll call him Reg because that's his name. And I said, well, Reg, I totally agree with you. I think you should express those views, particularly at this time. And as soon as he heard my voice, his eyes opened and he stepped back and he said, oh, goodness, Doc, I didn't know it was you. I said, that's right. I fully support your effect to say that, and particularly at this time, and I absolutely support it. He said, no, Doc, you don't understand. I've just called you whatever. Yeah. See you in Northern Territory.
See you next Tuesday.
And I said, no, you called me a Liberal one. That's a big difference. Yeah. But, I still defend your right. He said, no, you still don't understand. Yeah. He says, I've got to come and see you this afternoon about my knees. And
I'm not trusting what you're going to do them now.
He says, and I said, I'll look forward to seeing you. And he says, I better take one of your cards. He looked round furtively because he'd never done this, and he took a how to vote Liberal card and he walked in and gave a second vote, which was he'd never done in his life before. And that afternoon, I saw him, we had a laugh about it, I still bulk billed him. In other words, you can call your orthopaedic surgeon one of those things in the morning and he'll still see you in the afternoon and still bulk bill you. And that's Australia. And that's why I love Australia.
Well, it was Voltaire that said that, wasn't it? That I defend. Yeah. I might agree with what you say, but I defend to the death.
Obviously, within the film industry, there's been. I've been surrounded by so many left-wing people, and I used to get invited to the dinner parties, and they would even see me as a kind of curiosity because I was right-wing, and I would be happy to make some statements that are a bit, over the top, but politically incorrect. But that was like the 90s. It seemed like in the last 10 years with this whole cancel culture and everything, particularly around the time of Trump, that's when it was like somehow it just changed the political discourse.
That's right. You respect your views, may not agree with them, but I respect you to hold them.
Just as a matter of interest, Doc, on a completely different matter, why would you have had how to vote people standing outside the referendum, yes or no? Why would you need someone to hand you a yes or no voucher?
I have no idea.
If you didn't know you were going to vote yes or no before you got there, did you think someone who hands you out a thing, vote yes or vote no?
There are many things in life I cannot explain, and that's one of them. I never had anything to do with that.
Standing outside handing a yes or no voucher.
Yeah, I mean, it made absolutely no sense to me.
Well, now, look, Any other announcements we'd like to make? What have we done here?
I'll do a
Richard?
quick shout out to Tim Wilms. He wanted me to give him a shout out. Anyone you want to have a shout out to?
No, I just think it'd be good to. Although I've got my podcast, which is DamienRichardson.online. If anyone wants to jump on that, I should update it too and talk about, because I've also got a Facebook page, which is just a political page with my name on it. Because the Australia Day celebrations at the Doncaster Bowls Club, established in 1949, like you walk in there and it still looks like 1953. Do you know what I mean? The decor, it's just be a great place. You've got room to have 180 barefoot bowlers on the lawns, the greens, I should say. That's what they call them, isn't it?
The greens.
At one particular point in time. So
on the rink.
We could have a lot of people. The greens.
The rink.
Greens.
Oh, yeah, the rink.
Yeah,
That's
ends. They play ends.
They do.
Each different end. So it would be great to see a stack of people turn up there on the day, because we are celebrating the fact that that's when Arthur Phillip proclaimed the nation of Australia. So you can say you don't like it, you can say you have a problem with it, you can't change the date, because it just is a historical reality, whether
and it's
for,
like
for good or bad.
1984 when they do want to change it. They want to rewrite history. They want to rewrite everything. You know what I mean? Which is what George Orwell wrote about, which is the danger of all this bullshit.
Well, now look,
it's because of people's empathy for the Indigenous community that it happens to, because it happens inside of the so-called freedom movement as well. There's a lot of conjecture about what the date should be. It should be late July 30 or whatever, because apparently that's when the Red Cross came together to raise money for the diggers in the First World War, and they called it Australia Day. But even that belies the truth, because what were the diggers fighting for in the First World War? They were fighting for God, King and country.
They were fighting for Mother England.
And Mother England, the proclamation of Australia on January 20, it still leads back to it. So there's no way to get around it or get away with it. So anyway.
Well, Damien Richardson, thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure.
Richard Wollstonecraft, Muff Dick.
Yes.
The Muff Man.
Good to get you two together.
Doc Barney McCusker, what a star you are.
Thank you, Doc.
And OAM Stanley, thank you very much. You cannot be serious. We've spoken about a lot of things today and had a fascinating chat to Damien Richardson. So thank you very much, and that is it.